Thank you. Glad you all are able to be here today. 88% of Americans live more than an hour away from emergency neuro care. And this is not just if you live in a rural county, that can also be if with traffic across New York City, you're not able to get to one of the 3 neuro hospitals. Now, for many of you who are aware, time is brain means that the longer it takes to get care to patients, the more likely they're dealing with long-term brain damage. 2 million Americans have a treatable form of dementia called normal pressure hydrocephalus. Now, this is a case where body fluid, known as cerebral spinal fluid in the brain, is not circulating properly, not draining. There's a few theories. The point is that these patients with surgery can be treated, and in many cases receive up to 90% of their function back. Now, unfortunately today, many of them are misdiagnosed with Parkinson's or considered part of the normal aging process. Existing diagnostics are not quantitative, and they're difficult to come by, leaving many of these patients untreated. As little as 5% of those today are getting the care they need. Not only is this devastating for families recognizing that they could get their loved ones back, but it's also extremely wasteful. Many of these patients end up with spine surgeries, bladder surgeries, and decades of caregiving that they don't need. These are just 2 of the many types of patients that have a problem related to fluid pressure on the brain that is impacting their long-term disability. Some of these are coming through stroke and traumatic brain injury. Brain tumors, dementia, and even spinal surgeries can cause these complications. Now, unfortunately, since 1927, top neuro hospitals in the country have been relying on a string level to manage brain pressure, which is a great idea for your backyard fence, not such a great idea for the neuro ICU. Now, the way this happens today is they use what's called a manometer, which essentially depends on the height of the ear relative to the height of the device on the IV pole to manage the amount of volume that is drained based on the differential pressure. That means that a difference of as much as 2 or 3 inches can mean the patient is over or under draining. So these patients today are in the ICU because it requires that 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 nursing ratio. It makes it high risk, it makes it labor intensive, and it also means that right now they don't trust the existing data they're getting, and so they're once an hour putting a value in a free text box. For all of us who have been in med device long enough to know the promises we heard of what ML and AI could accomplish, not having clean data is one of the main things holding us back. So BrainSpace is solving this with a solution that's better for patients, that's simpler for nurses, and that provides clean, continuous data that's needed for neurosurgeons and neurointensivists to treat these patients better today during their hospital stay, and also provide the research that's needed for tomorrow's neuro breakthroughs. So to give you an idea of where we stand today, this is the gold standard. What you see on the left here is a manometer-based drain that can be placed into the brain or into the spine. It's then attached to a pressure transducer that's used in invasive blood pressure monitoring, which is attached to a cable and then a blood pressure monitor. And then once an hour, the nurse comes in, moves the stopcock, and switches back and forth between drainage or pressure. BrainSpace is replacing all of that with an automated connected device that includes a wearable worn at the ear, allowing for patient mobility, allowing for early mobilization after stroke, and allowing for especially our pediatric and geriatric patients to not have to be sedated in order to stop their movement. We've also added in patent-pending drip detection that increases the confidence and trust from the team. And with this integrated trend data, we're seeing new advances in machine learning. Ultimately, we also believe that this will lead to shorter ICU stays. So when we look at our first market, we're entering the neuro ICU. In the US, that's a service addressable market of 890 million with our first product. There are 3 primary populations in the neuro ICU. The first being neurotrauma. These are coming in through the emergency room, stroke, TBIs, spine trauma. The second is the dementia case that I told you about. And the third is surgical recovery. So whether that's a spinal cord surgery, a skull-based tumor, or surgeries like TAAA, in this case, there's an intentional low pressure in order to improve healing. Now, I've been telling you about the benefits for clinicians and the benefits for patients, but for all of us who sell to hospitals, what's their ROI? Well, long term, we expect to see improved patient outcomes and we expect to see cost savings associated with that, but immediately, it's the ICU bed. So ICU congestion creates choke points for the ER, for the OR. It limits a hospital's ability to do surgery, and it also is a problem for nursing utilization. So the ability to get these patients out of the ICU is the most compelling proposition today. Now, for some of these trauma patients, nothing's getting them out of the ICU. But for many of them, the spine drain is the only reason they're there today. And so the feedback has been that if we can get those patients down to a floor unit, down to a step-down unit, that's an immediate cost savings and benefit. So why now? 3 main reasons. The first reason is the aging population. So these conditions are much more prevalent in those over 65, and that number is continuing to grow with demographics. But we also have the problem that neurosurgeons, neurointensivists, and neuro-ICU nurses tend to be quite an experienced population, which means that they're retiring right now at a faster rate than they can be trained, which is causing severe shortages that have only been made worse during COVID. So there's a demand, there's a recruiting challenge. The second piece is from a cost standpoint. I've spent enough time in medical to know if you don't have margins, you're not going to survive long. There have been some advances in consumer technology that now allow us to leverage key components that have gone from the size of a soda can down to smaller than a dime, from a couple $1,000s a piece down to $1 a piece. What that does is it allows us to get that 90% gross margin on our recurring revenue, even at low volume. The third is the rise of remote consults. So we hear a lot about telemedicine and what that looks like in the home, but there's also been an increase in the number of patients who, rather than being transferred, are being consulted on from doctor to doctor, from hospital to hospital. This telestroke networks, for example, that were prevalent before COVID have only increased in the last few years. So not only is now the right time, but we're the right team. So my co-founder and I have been working together for the last 8 years across 3 medical device companies. We started out working in contract design for a large Fortune 500 publicly traded company, where we were part of the medical device group taking products from early prototype through to scaled production. We then ran an R&D consulting organization where we were advising seed and Series A stage startups, as well as those that were acquiring or being acquired. We've also brought on expert advisors in the 3 key stakeholder groups that represent our primary populations of users. Barry is an MD, is a neurointensivist, formerly at NYU, now in the Providence system. Millie has worked as an ICU nurse and nurse educator. And John, after spending 30 years in neurosurgery, is now functioning as a regional chief medical officer, again within Providence. So we've been making efficient progress. In January of 2021, we had a proof of concept. It was COVID, so this is our guest bathroom, AKA wet lab. In middle of 2021, we had a commercial prototype. This functioning system is here with me, and I welcome you to come see a demo afterwards. And we've been putting that into the hands of doctors and nurses, which has allowed us to get feedback from over 50 with hands-on demos and more than 175 with interviews. We're expecting to be at 3% of the expanded market with product 2 by year 5. And beyond that, we also have a patent pending pipeline. So our first patent covers a number of products that gets us into invasive blood pressure monitoring, as well as abdominal pressure monitoring. And then our additional patents really take us beyond simply drainage and pressure and into the integration of lab-based testing being brought to the bedside. That allows us to have more automated diagnostics and inline treatments that are currently not possible because of the existing limitations. So, you're getting to hear about BrainSpace, a company that is at seed stage with a compelling value proposition and a deep pipeline. We have a strong founding team who knows how to bring products to market in a capital-efficient way, and we have a big vision for a highly profitable and highly meaningful business. If you'd like to learn more about being a part of our seed raise or participating in our clinical partnerships, or you're just curious and would like to see our demo, feel free to meet us in the room next door. Thank you very much.